Hi, my name is Adam David, and welcome back to my channel, Spirit University, where you find the occult and the scientific meeting in one place to better ourselves and humanity. So on the right here, we have a picture of DNA. It's a computer model, of course. Our DNA is the keys to our human spacesuit and any living organism. It's like a unique frequency to communicate between those different levels of reality. This is a interview with Michael Levin. He has been studying bioelectricity in organisms. And he's also created these cool little organisms that he calls xenobots that he is able to program to do various tasks. Yeah, let's just watch this real quick.
I think a lot of the biology community focuses on the chemicals as the signaling mechanisms that make the whole thing work. You have, I think, to a large degree, uniquely, maybe you can correct me on that, have focused on the bioelectricity, which is using electricity for signaling. There's also probably mechanical,
sure,
like knocking on the door. Yep. So what's the difference and what's an electrical network?
Yeah. So I want to make sure and kind of give credit where credit is due. So as far back as 1903 and probably late 1800s already, people were thinking about the importance of electrical phenomena in life. So I'm for sure not the first person to stress the importance of electricity. There were waves of research in the 30s, in the 40s, and then again in the kind of 70s, 80s, and 90s of sort of the pioneers of bioelectricity who did some amazing work on all this. I think what we've done that's new is to step away from this idea that, and I'll describe what the bioelectricity is step away from the idea that, well, here's another piece of physics that you need to keep track of to understand physiology and development, and to really start looking at this as saying, no, this is a privileged computational layer that gives you access to the actual cognition of the tissue, of basal cognition. So merging that developmental biophysics with ideas in cognition of computation and so on. I think that's what we've done that's new. But people have been talking about bioelectricity for a really long time, and so I'll define that. So what happens is that if you have a single cell has a membrane. In that membrane are proteins called ion channels, and those proteins allow charged molecules, potassium, sodium chloride, to go in and out under certain circumstances. And when there's an imbalance of those ions, there becomes a voltage gradient across that membrane. And so all living cells, try to hold a particular kind of voltage difference across the membrane, and they spend a lot of energy to do so. When you so that's a single cell. When you have multiple cells, the cells sitting next to each other, they can communicate their voltage state to each other via a number of different ways. But one of them is this thing called a gap junction, which is basically like a little submarine hatch that just kind of docks, right? And the ions from one side can flow to the other side and vice versa. So
isn't it incredible that this evolved? Isn't that wild? Because that didn't exist.
Correct. This had to be evolved.
And it had to be invented.
That's right.
So somebody invented electricity in the ocean. When did this get invented?
Yeah. So I mean, it is incredible. The guy who discovered gap junctions, Werner Lowenstein, I visited him. He was really old.
A human being?
He discovered them.
Because who really discovered them lived probably 4 billion years ago.
Good point.
So you're give credit where credit is due. I'm just saying.
He rediscovered gap junctions. But
So gap junctions are protein channels that form channels or pores connecting the cytoplasm of adjacent cells. These channels allow for the passage of ions, small molecules, and electrical signals directly between neighboring cells. Gap junctions are vital for the transmission of bioelectrical signals across tissues and organs. They enable coordinated cellular activity such as synchronizing the beating of heart muscle cells or the movement of cilia in the respiratory tract. This synchronized activity is crucial for the proper functioning of organs and tissues. From bioelectricity to tissue generation, gap junctions play a multifaceted role in the intricate dance of life at the cellular level. We are inhabiting the gaps in between every cell in the body. And then we are using our nervous system to communicate that all back to our brain. Stuart Hameroff is an anesthesiologist because he was fascinated with consciousness as a child. He can't understand how we have an entire science on anesthesiology, but no one can tell you why these drugs work. We just know that they do. And that was concerning to him. So he set out to figure out why these drugs work. Eventually he did a lot of research, and he discovered that Roger Penrose had written a book called The Emperor Has No Clothes. And that book is about how quantum mechanics takes all of physics and just throws it out the window, and that we really don't know anything. Stuart Hameroff took this and he started to look in the brain for quantum parts. He eventually found these things called microtubules. And these microtubules are hexagonal tubes that run throughout all of the body, and in particular in the brain, and they create sort of like a tunneling system for, well, we don't know yet, but we think it's quantum bits, as they would call them. I would say it's longitudinal interferometry. If you look at the right here, again, we have the hexagon. And if you remember, hexagons contain charge. So if you had these little tiny longitudinal waves of charge that need to go from cells to cells, a great way to transport them without having them bleed all over the place would be with hexagonal tubes acting as waveguides. And there was an experiment done a few years ago now where they took one of these microtubules and they set it up and they shot it with a laser. And the way you tell if something is quantum in nature is when you fire a laser at this object. If on the other side you see two lasers, you have a quantum object. They saw two lasers, thus confirming that these microtubules are quantum in nature. So our body is quantum. Looking more at the shape of charge, there's the concept of piezoelectric force. Piezoelectricity is the phenomenon when certain materials like quartz or ceramics or maybe microtubules generate an electric charge in response to mechanical stress or pressure. This piezoelectric effect has two key aspects. The direct piezoelectric effect is the generation of electric charge when a mechanical force is applied. The piezoelectric effect depends on the crystal structure of the material or any material. Crystals lacking a center of symmetry exhibit strong piezoelectric properties. Notice this picture on the right. It is a hexagon that is empty in the center. Notice the shape. It's like a, I don't know what you call that, like a Y kind of. Then here on the left is showing you hit the quartz and you get some electricity. Piezo means pressure. Now, in the human brain, there are sacs of fluid called ventricles. And these are, for all intents and purposes, like the blood of the brain. These run, as you can see on the right, up and down the spine and then circle through the brain in a cyclical fashion. Itzhak Bentov, in his book Stalking the Wild Pendulum, did research on what Kundalini is in the brain. And what he discovered is that when the heart beats down the left descending aorta, if one holds their breath, there's like the heartbeat will travel down to the end of the aorta, and then if a heartbeat is skipped, there's a reverberation to let the heart know, hey, stop pumping because we just had a problem here. So the heart uses that reverberation to know if there's an issue and if it should stop pumping or continue. So this reverberation, as you can see down here, is captured. You got the first heart sound and then the second heart sound. So it's the thump, the thump. But if it gets here's the thump, the thump, the thump, thump, it stops. It slows down. Now that pattern is carried up the aorta until it creates a standing wave in the center, and slowly through acquiring more and more standing waves, these standing waves travel up the aorta and reach the ventricles of the brain. And these standing waves then begin to propagate in the center of the brain on the third ventricle or the center, creating still points around where our pineal gland is, the pine cone. And here on the top right, you can see that if you look at the brain as a plasma torus or a torus, and you see the charge as the plasma, it is going in a plasma-like function where it would circle around both sides. It would go like this. And this creates standing waves in the brain. And if you maintain this long enough, the sensation of Kundalini will happen. And the reason people feel an entire body sensation is because if you look at this picture on the top, you can see the sensory cortex homunculus. This is the parts of the brain, parts of the body mapped to the surface of the brain. You know how when they show the doctors opening up a guy's face or brain and touching different parts and different parts move. That's this. So that electric charge will make you feel like your toes are going numb, your legs, your face, your feet, your hands. And then finally, the top of your head generally feels like it's tingling or burning or something. And that is Kundalini. That is a powerful connection using longitudinal interferometry to communicate. Moving on to just our DNA then. So it turns out the shape of DNA with its double helix nature is really just two sine waves ratcheted around a dodecahedron. If you look here on at both these pictures, you can see the waves as it turns around each turn of the dodecahedron. Ratchet is around in a counterclockwise motion to the top of the dodecahedron, creating the double helix structure. Here's a better image of it. As you can see, the green line is ratcheted around each dodecahedron. And ratcheting means when you take a shape and then you turn it by one axis. 1:5 ratio turn. Another amazing feature of DNA is that it itself is electrically implosive. This middle picture here, where it says one ring of the ladder of DNA, if you notice that we have a pent to a cube, then we distribute into another cube, but really we have a hollow center, allowing charge to propagate right out of the center. DNA radio. How does that combine in the brain? Is through our brainwaves and the different harmonics of reality interacting with our brainwaves. It's long been known that when you're asleep, you'll do delta and theta brainwaves, and when you're imagining, you'll do alpha brainwaves, and beta when you're doing beta work, and gamma when you're doing high functioning. And these frequencies are associated with, the different mental states. These different brain states correlate with the different harmonics in higher and lower densities or dimensions. And the octaves are really just the separation of those different densities and dimensions. And when brain waves are ordered in a correct golden ratio function with the gamma, alpha, theta, beta, delta, it creates like a cone for the charge at the top of the head, as we just showed, for it to use Hermes caduceus and reach that center point at the pineal gland. So you have two parts to this. You have Kundalini-like functions using the piezoelectric force of squeezing into the center of the brain. And then you also have the golden harmonics of brain waves. These two pieces allow shifting to higher and lower realities. And the reason this works is because there's a phenomenon known as four-way mixing. And that is to say that when you fire two energies that are phase conjugate, or that are constructively interfering with each other, so creating higher amplifications. If you fire a third energy wave at those two, it creates a fourth wave that is sent right back at the third stream. This is why the double slit experiment, if you guys are familiar with that, is the way it is. The act of observing changes reality because observing is interacting. But now I'd say we have strong evidence that a soul is an electrical plasma that is inhabiting a body. And I think we should start to treat life differently because of that. What we really are we are souls that are communicating through higher levels of reality, through DNA radio, through different octaves. So old practices before the modern age suddenly take on deeper and more serious meanings because they're backed by scientific principles. The woo suddenly becomes not so woo, it becomes real. So things like astrology, remote viewing, Reiki, astral projection, channeling, reincarnation, numerology, crystals, mediumship, auras, higher dimensions, spirit guides, lucid dreaming, Christianity, and so much more are suddenly legitimate, and they suddenly have new light shined on them while they have been with humanity since the beginning. Not to mention how this begins to uncover our ancient history and why these sacred shapes are all over antiquity. I believe that our ancestors were in possession of knowledge they couldn't quite understand. However, due to the unconscious nature of the soul, it was given to us so that we would internalize it for when humanity's material brain was ready for it. Some more images to kind of make my point here. This is the Mandelbrot set we showed at the beginning. If you zoom in on this little tiny one down here at the bottom, you can see there's the whole thing, the whole Mandelbrot set. And now I like to say is, what if this is us? What if this little guy down here, what if this is us? Here's our crown chakra. Here's the 8th density. And then we start getting into some really cool stuff. And then in ancient history, you will notice that a lot of times they're always holding one of these eggs. And they're always holding it with their fingers aligned on the splines. I've drawn some arrows over this to show that I think that they are putting their electric charge into these splines and focal pointing it at the center, the tip, to transfer energy, knowledge, whatever, information. I'd also like to draw your attention to that flower symbol on their wrist. As we know, the flower of life is Taurus. So are they showing that they have electric energy amplifiers for the psychic abilities on their wrists? And then this is a slide from Dan Winter. He's showing that by using these vortexes and golden ratio, you can do things like create the rumored German flying saucers. On the top here, we have the Mercury vortex that was rumored the Nazis created. It creates gravity. Comes down at a per golden ratio, one in the center. And then here, I just for fun imposed that image over the Mandelbrot set to show that fractality does create gravity because flying saucers work by nullifying gravity. So to close, I want to say a big thank you to Dan Winter and to Itzhak Bentov and Tom Bearden and so many other people. I guarantee this slide will be updated. And thank you to you if anyone watches this.